Ready? Hit it.
Yep, here he comes. Riding his trusted steed through the Sierra foothills as he brings you the news.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
He calls himself
Charlie!
What you doing, Charlie?
Sorry, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. There you are. Look how cute you are. Yeah.
Hey, Charlie. What's with the dark glasses?
And now, here he is, a man of God, living in a world of Disney.
Ow, Charlie!
Charlie Simons.
Charlie bit me.
Talking about two things you're never supposed to talk about, religion and politics. That's what I do here on the show. Thank you so much. But once in a while, I deviate. There's a new thing that I want to do on the show, and I'm calling it Hitmen, the Hitmen. I want to feature people who play the hits, basically. Being a radio guy all my life, radio and television, but I started off strong on the radio. College, right out of high school, working on the college station, had my first professional job by the time I was 19. That was just my second semester in college, and never looked back, never looked back. And it's so funny, somebody asked me the other day, what'd you go to college for? And I said, to be a marine biologist. True story. And then I met the instructor from radio and television while I was sitting in the quad where the college radio station was, and I was listening to it and enjoying it because I've always loved radio, always. And I'm having some lunch, and there's this old guy sitting next to me, old as in like he was probably 40-something, and with a handlebar mustache, and just jovial, laughed a lot, knee slapping, one of those kind of guys. And I thought, this guy's character, man. Turns out he's a radio and TV instructor, and he goes, you know what? You should come sit in on one of my classes. He just happened to have one at 3 o'clock that afternoon, and I didn't. So I did. I walked out of there and said, I'll be darned. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I never looked back. Went to the office at admissions at the college and said, I'm canceling all my animal husbandry, all the other things I was doing to be a marine biologist. Canceled them. I was only 2 weeks in and took every radio and TV course that they offered. And they said, well, you can't do that unless the instructor says it's okay. And I said, okay. I went to the instructor at the college radio station. I said, here's what I'm going to do. And here's what I want to do. He said, if you think you can handle it, go for it. It's all I've done. I've had great success. I've had great sorrows. I've had highs and lows. I've made more money than I've made in my entire life. I've been a six-figure income morning show guy in San Francisco, the fourth largest market in the nation. I've worked in Los Angeles. I've worked I loved it. I never got tired of it. There's no other job like it, that's for sure. The only reason why I'm not doing it still is because, well, two reasons, really. It outgrew me, and I outgrew it. I had a life change when I got saved when I was 31. I was very dirty morning show in San Francisco. Double-digit numbers in key demographics, which anybody doesn't, know the media. What do you care? You don't know what that means. Just know it was significant. Beat KGO 12 plus. Nobody was doing that in the Bay Area. I did. Then I got saved. And I went on the air and started talking about, I'm a Christian now, a follower of Christ Jesus. Management flipped, fired me, said I broke my contract because I wasn't giving them the kind of show that they had hired me to do. Yep, you're right. And I'm not going to anymore. Not that I've been a perfect Christian. Please. But I never quit radio. Never said, well, I got to do something else now. I was like, no, I got to find a way to do something else that will allow me to be who I am. But that's become more and more rare. And now forget about it. They don't want personalities anymore. You don't need radio anymore because you got everything on your phone. Everything on your phone. You don't need me to tell you what the weather's like or what concerts coming up this weekend or what fun things there's going to be to do. Or you don't need me to, you have to wait on me to play your favorite song. Oh, right there. That to me has been the death of radio as we know it. But my guest today, on my very first installment, and I'm going to start doing these at least once a month, called The Hitmen. I want to bring people to you who have been influential in the business. His name is Lee Abrams. He's one of the most humble people I've met and gracious people in the business, and that's hard to find, as he'll, I'm sure, tell you. What an extraordinary mind, and invented a new format. Just blaze that trail in a business that doesn't like change. This is what we have found works. This is what we're sticking with until hell or high water, and we lose in the ratings, and some other competition comes in and takes our position of power, and so on and so forth. It's all bottom line about the advertising dollar. So if you can come up with a successful format that's going to do something that nobody else is doing, you're going to have to encounter, first of all, your own people in the business fighting against it. Yeah, it'll never work. And then you've got to actually get the audience. Now, if you have some management and ownership that will get behind it and promote it, you're going to be okay. You got to get the word out, though, because it's all about getting listeners. And by getting listeners, you get advertising dollars, because they're going to spend money where the most listeners are. Lee Abrams, you just don't know how cool it is that you said yes to being on my show. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, cool. I was looking forward to it.
You started did you start it? Well, first of all, to anybody who doesn't know the kind of radio that I grew up with and that I absolutely fell in love with and wanted to do, and thankfully I actually got to towards the tail end, but it kind of all started dying away when the 90s and the mid 90s got closer. Top 40 radio was all but dead. But this is what I grew up with. Check this out.
KFM, BFM, San Diego. Shotgun Tom Kelly in the morning. Good morning, baby. How you feeling? Oh, you know, I'm feeling really good this morning as we get up and boogie the right way. Have mercy. It's stereo. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gary, otherwise known as Mr. Personal Pair, sitting here in my tuxedo that I get exposed in living color. Baby, just rocking and rolling and getting down with a little Rick Barrett here. Rock and roll, we can go. B100 has the concert in San Diego. ELO is so violent.
There it is. That's just a little taste, a little example of what Top 40 radio used to be like. And you had to have that kind of energy. You had to bring, and everybody needed a gimmick. Shotgun Tom had a gimmick. Dr. Don Rose had a gimmick. I'm a NorCal guy, so most of my references will be that, and SoCal. Rick D's gimmick, different. Jackson Armstrong was always one of my favorites. He had his gorilla he talked to while he was on the air. And that was exciting. It was fun. It was energetic. And it was definitely teen oriented. And people who got into college and they're buying these albums and they're hearing deeper cuts, as they say, off the album, were not getting super served on the radio, were they?
No, not at all.
So what happened? How did you change that?
Well, we changed, we noticed in the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of people were gravitating toward the new generation of artists, Jimi Hendrix, Jethro Tull, and Moody Blues, and artists like that. But we found a whole audience of what we call vulnerable top 40 listeners. These were listeners who listened to top 40, but might have liked every fourth record. They'd hear Stones, great, love it. Then they'd hear Bread and the Carpenters and Herb Alpert, not so much. Then on would come a Beatles record. They loved that. So our idea was to change the familiarity factor from song title to artist. Whereas in top 40 radio, the critical factor is that every song is familiar. You can hum every song. You got to play the hits. What we did was change the familiarity factor from the song title to the artist. And we call it the oh wow factor, because somebody would be listening to one of our stations and hear a cut-off Santana album, for example, and say, oh wow, that's Santana, but it's not Black Magic Woman again. So by changing the familiarity factor from title to artist, we have the ability to play a wide range of songs without losing the familiarity factor. So what you'd hear is the Moody Blues and the Stones and the Beatles, and yes, but you wouldn't necessarily, you would hear the hit single, but you'd hear, dozens of other songs from their album. So it had tremendous depth, and it was as commercial as possible without losing its progressive identity.
You had to
And
change the delivery though. You couldn't be doing what those guys are doing and going into I don't know, Sugarloaf, Green Eyed Lady. Of course, that was a top 40 hit too, though. But
yeah,
you had to change your delivery style too, didn't you?
absolutely. It was a complete reinvention of rock radio. And what we did was a lot of crazy research. We'd do things like hitchhiking surveys. We'd go out in the morning and hitchhike and talk to people about their radio listening habits while they're in the car. And we found things like, in top 40 radio, a lot of the DJs were really impressed with themselves when they'd talk up a record right to the vocal.
Like
And
Tom Kelly did there. He was going to take it all the way up until they started singing.
well, we found a lot of listeners hated that. I mean,
And you're
driving
right.
along-
We did that. That was like a chat. We weren't doing that for the audience. We were doing that to impress each other.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
things like that. And the energy, the artificial energy, and again, it worked very well, particularly for teens. But this was a little older, a little more musically sophisticated audience between 16 and 30, and they just found the intensity of the top 40 to be just too whack for them. They just needed a nice mellow delivery and great music with awesome production in between. And a lot of new special programming, a lot of block party weekends and midnight album hours and 2 for Tuesdays and all those kind of things, which oddly enough, 60 years later, people are still doing, which is weird.
They
But
are.
at the time, it was very
And
inventive.
after starting my career in top 40 radio, my very first rock radio gig, doing mornings for Citadel in Rock 104 in Modesto. And at the very end of Layla by Derek and the Dominoes, Eric Clapton, there's a little bird tweet at the very
Right.
end of the song. And I started talking before the bird tweet. Hotline, don't ever talk before the bird tweet. Let the song go all the way. Don't interrupt the music. I had to
Right.
relearn everything.
Right. Well, a lot of our principles of our format we introduced in the early 70s were based on top 40 principles, playing familiar music, call letter identification, things like that. What it didn't have was that just intense energy and the top 40 songs. It was dedicated to the emerging album movement.
And I'm going to ask you, don't take this as like I'm making a political statement. How much of the success of AOR, album-oriented rock, and then album-oriented radio, how much of it was influenced by the drug culture that came in the late 60s, early 70s?
Well, I don't think our format was influenced by that as much as the artists. They were making music that was directly result of the drug culture that was happening at the time. So, we didn't, there were FM stations at the time that had, stash boxes in the control room. We didn't go that way. We let the artists do the political and drug messaging. But we were pretty straightforward. We just wanted to play the most important records of our genre and do it in a very complete fashion where, again, it wasn't just great music, but it had the DJs who were very calm and would talk about the music. We had production. It was very theater of the mind, very stereophonic and out there. And it was very much, the mechanics were in place, and the drug culture or politics really didn't influence us that much.
AM versus FM. There's no way the AOR format was going to work. I don't think as well on AM as Top 40 did, because it wasn't so much about it was. I was telling it. I got to finally see Lee ELO on their
they're
very
great.
final tour
Fantastic.
ever, and I've loved them my entire life. I've loved them, and I finally got to see them live. And I was explaining to a friend of mine about any ELO record was so processed and so compressed that, let's say, Don't Bring Me Down. You play that, starts here, right there at 0 dB on the meters, and it never really moved. It stayed right there. It was totally made for AM radio, and most of the songs were, and you couldn't do that, could you?
No, no. Even our processing of the signal was more about
On
wide.
FM.
Yeah,
It
and
would have been too much on FM just to play all songs like that processed. So it had to be much more real and a fuller sound. And you totally took advantage of the better quality of FM, but yet nobody was really listening to FM. How did you overcome that?
well,
That was
it took
1972, right? That was your first AOR
yeah
switch?
71, 72.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was tough originally just because of the in-car penetration wasn't that high. But a lot of stations did FM converter days, which sold hundreds of thousands of FM converters, where you just plug it into your radio and all of a sudden you have FM. But then things really turned around. The more and more the auto industry introduced FM in the car, then it was all over. But it took a little time to
Took a
gain.
decade. I mean, KFRC in San Francisco was still doing pretty dang well in 81 and 82 on AM, playing top 40
Oh
music.
yeah, it took a while, but I'd say by the mid '70s, most of the cars had FM, and of course there were AM stations still doing very well, but we really got our fair share in the mid '70s, I'd say.
Now let's talk about management. How did you get radio people on board when radio people don't really like change? They embrace wherever they think the quick dollar is going to be.
Well, the advantage we had was FM was literally playing dentist office music on
That was
automation.
it. Classical and beautiful music.
Right. So
Yeah.
it was easy to go into a station and say, look, you got a 9 on your AM, doing great. Your FM, nothing. We can, for very little cost, mobilize your FM and make it a competitor in the market. And a lot of people said, yeah, well, we're not doing much with our FM, and this doesn't sound like it costs a lot. Okay, we'll give it a try. Then a couple success stories when it just went through the roof on FM. That's all you needed.
Yeah, and
We
then
had,
you got a lot of sheep in radio. They all jump on board and they try and act like they invented it. It was my idea all along.
oh yeah,
Uh,
we
what
had
one thing that Lee mentioned there was a 9. You have a 9 on your AM. For those who don't know, what does that mean?
well, 9 share is usually right at the top of the rating heap, at least in a bigger market. So the AM station with a 9 was probably number 1 or 2 in their market.
And that's how splintered it was even then. That 9% of the listening audience, of any potential listening audience in any quarter hour, because it was always measured in 15 minutes, because it was a diary. People got paid $10,
Right.
I think, to fill out a diary for a week, and that was a huge deal when you think about it. 9%, that's it. Why are you all happy about that? Because it was so splintered. It's even more so now, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's all niched out. And back then, in the early '70s, didn't really have that many formats compared to what we have now. It's country and album rock and top 40, middle of the road, beautiful music, and R&B and a handful of others. But compared to now, where you have a lot more variety.
Are you officially retired?
Oh no, I'm as active as ever. Just not doing much in radio, but working on a documentary which will be starring John Cleese about the history of American culture and music as told through the filter of radio. So it starts with the old R&B and hillbilly stations of the late '40s, early '50s, goes up through the great top 40 stations, FM, all the way up to alternative formats into streaming and satellites. So it covers sort of it's called Sonic Messengers, and it talks about the creation of the great American soundtrack, which was radio. And also working on a 24/7 video news project, which I think will be revolutionary. It's a new 24/7 digital news service that breaks every rule, and it is as different from today's television news as FM was to AM back 50 years ago.
Really? I had no
Yeah.
idea. That's exciting.
Oh yeah, it's
For anyone else who doesn't know, Lee mentioned satellite. I was at an R&R convention in New Orleans, and you were one of the guest speakers, and you started talking about this new thing coming up. Radio is going to be on satellite, and we're all like, okay, here's the next gimmick. It'll never work. You started XM Satellite.
Yeah, I was actually the first employee there, and that was an amazing situation because the mandate was we got to create really fascinating radio that is so good people will pay for it. And so we started with a blank canvas and just tried to reinvent every imaginable format and create new ones. And we used to do boot camps, which were these day-long sessions with our staff. We did dozens of these where we would unteach them everything they learned about radio and reteach them the XM way. And we even built a cliche buzzer. If somebody comes up with a radio cliche, they get buzzed. 3 buzzes and they're fired. Nobody got fired. But the point was, let's have a funny morning show with a female news sidekick. Two for Tuesday, and done.
Good, thank
A
God.
lot of new thinking.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
We have to change. One of the guys I played earlier, I had the honor of getting to meet him and work with him even for a minute during a KFRC reunion. And that's Shotgun Tom Kelly. Has not changed his delivery one iota.
No, I know.
But he's been able to work a career out of it just because, again, you got a gimmick that's strong enough and memorable to where people like you and top of mind awareness, right, Toma, which is
Right.
what you always want in the business. But I've always been more the type of when I was getting started in Top 40 radio and in my career, I'd hear all these other guys doing these cliches you're talking about. And I would ascertain, I'm going to do it differently. I'm doing a morning show at night, 7 to midnight. I'm doing anything that everybody else was doing. I wanted to go the other direction. And I think I had a little bit more longevity in my career than most because I was moldable. I could go from Top 40 screaming as loud as possible radio to doing an AOR format, working an oldies format, jumping over to country. I was able to adapt. And I don't see a lot of that, though, in the business. People are not rewarded for that, are they?
No, it's a completely different industry these days. It's interesting with radio having so much competition from obviously streaming and satellites and other technologies that haven't even emerged yet. You'd think radio would be on creative steroids, reinventing them. And in fact, they're on autopilot.
Yes. It's like they're scared to do anything. Well, we're
I
just going
know.
to play the music and do some imaging every now and then and be happy that we've got a 2 share and $1 a holler for our commercials just to keep the format alive. A lot of that was Clear Channel, now iHeart, buying up more stations than they really ever should have or could have, and then trying to do everything they can to stay viable. It's been disastrous to the business. Voice tracking's been disastrous to the business. The greatest thing about radio to me was the effect of marrying your market and talking local and relating to those are your people, and I'm now one of you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. But on XM satellite, you lost all that. You had no connection with what was going on in different markets, could you?
Well, actually, we did. We looked at we tried to be a local station, but our locality was the whole country. So we'd take advantage of that. We'd have phone calls, particularly in our oldies stations, phone calls from all over the country, people calling in from their cars, and it really became a national community. And
Good.
if there was a concert, say, I don't know, Bruce Springsteen was opening in Philadelphia, we'd treat that like the Super Bowl. We'd have our staff down there handling the live event. And so, yeah, we took local very seriously, except it's a big locality, the whole country.
I think K-Love, of course, it was at the time, the CEO was Mike Novak, another one of my radio heroes. He was very good at they have one station, one studio in hundreds of different markets and all calling it K-Love. And
Right.
contemporary Christian music. He was fantastic at establishing local things going on for each station and trying to make it as local and relatable as possible. It sounds like he got a lot of that from you in XM.
Yeah, we did that also. We had a format called Z-Rock, which was part of the ABC radio network, satellite music network originally. And that was also kind of a super station. It was national and proud of it. And again, had competitions between cities and opened the phones up to the whole country, and it was great. It made local radio sound quaint, just because it had this bigness to it.
Mhm.
But satellite radio before XM Sirius was programmed out of Dallas, sent up the satellites, and beamed down to local stations that rebroadcast it locally. And most of those were just hiding the fact they were in Dallas. We said, no, let's open it up. Let's be real honest and truthful about it. And people loved it. So I think there are ways for a national station to be very, intimate on a local basis, even though it's national. But it's not easy, but it's doable.
But then along comes voice tracking, and I think that has definitely adversely affected the business a lot too.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
you-
more trickery, tricking
yeah.
people into
It's
thinking that.
exactly right. It's not being honest, is it?
No, and AI DJs are kind of like that too. They're not real. It's trickery. Radio loves to trick people. The most variety, the most this, the best this. It's all nonsense. People are smarter than that. They have good both BS detectors,
Yeah.
and you can't trick them. You could years ago say you're the best, most variety, most music. People would believe it. Nowadays, it's no, the best music's on my iPhone. Don't tell me that.
Right? Yeah. They don't have to wait for you to play their favorite song. Where are we going now? What do you see? Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? Could people actually start rallying back around their local radio again, or is that done?
Well, I think under 50, it's a real problem. The younger you get, radio is something their parents and grandparents used. And, things like commercials. Why put up with commercials or somebody else's playlist when they can create their own? And, it's a tough situation because on the younger side, just because radio's so out of their media mix. I
And you
remember
can't buy a book anymore with the people meters.
that's
You
right.
can't buy a book. It used to be you'd put all your money into a billboard campaign because people who are filling out the diaries directly aimed at them. Top of mind awareness. What did I listen to today? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, I saw that KXOA. I'll write that down.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very real. You could buy a book. You buy TV advertising, put advertising on your other stations for that station, and the billboards, newspapers would buy a ratings book. But
Oh,
you can't get away with
absolutely.
that now with the people meters.
No, that's true. And it's ratings have never been perfect, and I don't know if they are now. But I like to look at ratings over a period of 2 years. Where you see something consistent, and you kind of know it's for real. But we did research at the beginning of FXM to find out who is going to be our key audience. And when we talked to younger people, and this is a while back, this is late 90s, early 2000s, older people over 50 love the idea. Wow, all these great channels. You got jazz channel, a blues channel. Wow, no commercials. This is great. You talk to younger people, and it's 100 channels of radio that I have to pay for. Radio sucks. Why would I pay for radio? So they're preconditioned to thinking it's not going to be good.
I'm amazed at how many people under the age of 40 don't know what AM and FM is.
Oh, I know. I do think there's a lot of potential for over 50, but it's going to take some new formats, not just the same AC and oldie stations. And already there's some stations playing real deep libraries of oldies, a station in Phoenix, one in Chicago, that are doing very well. So I think there needs to be some experimentation and some creativity applied to the 50-plus audience.
As an old top 40 guy, I love the classic hits format. If I were to get back on the air where I'm doing a shift every day, it would probably be either that or country. But I really like it. It's fun. I'm getting to kind of relive, the glory days with the same music again. But you can't get away with having that same delivery. Nobody wants a JoJo Kincaid on a classic hit station.
Not anymore. No, it's.
Uh-uh.
I think there's hope over 50, and I think online radio, if an Apple or an Amazon really got serious about it, they could create an amazing global radio station. But they're not. And I think it's they're technology people. They don't understand the radio experience. But
And
boy,
they don't
man,
see a lot of money in it. They've seen. I even started an online station for about 3 years, and it did well. I even had listeners in Germany, and I didn't make any money off of it.
yeah, that's why I think it's got to be an Apple or an Amazon that can really spend a ton of money and circulate it all over the world and just create a superstation that an individual really couldn't do, just financially speaking.
I love it. I still love it. I miss it. I miss that connection with an audience. I
Oh,
miss
I
that.
know it's great, and radio has it was the soundtrack of the nation for so many years,
Yeah,
and it's sad that it's not. And a lot of it's self-inflicted, combined with just tremendous financial strife from overbuying, overpaying, and all that.
yeah.
And
And too many other choices for online advertising
oh
to
yeah,
buy it, but to buy an ad campaign on radio. Why? It worked for Motel 6, still is. They only advertise on radio, but that's few and far between. There's just too many other choices. But
yeah, really
man,
are.
I do miss it though. I'll tell you what, I
Oh,
really
I know,
do.
I do too. I listen to old air checks and for entertainment all the time. Just love what it was, but
All the talent that you've worked with over the years, and DJs are always called talent. That's because we're all arrogant. We want to be called talent. Um, all the talent you've worked with over the years, any stand out in your mind as particularly really hard to work with? Can you give us some stories?
really hard to work with. No, because I figured out there's empathy and there's ways to deal with talent. And unfortunately, you can't deal with everybody the same. You got to be fair and respectful of everybody. But people have different buttons to push. So I've never really had any problem with ego trips, even though, I've dealt with the Howard Sterns and Steve Dahl and Sonny Fox and most of the morning teams, which tend to have pretty big egos, but never had any problem. Just be real straightforward and know what their buttons are. And
I think a lot of that's because of your personality, and you're much more even keeled than many others in the business.
yeah, that's
Who are
probably true.
ones that stick out in your mind as just like they were bigger than the room?
Excuse me. Well, Howard Stern, of course, because we actually gave him his first major market gigs, and there's a guy named Sonny Fox out in Philadelphia, who's also just bigger than life, and every station most stations had at least one or two of those types that really stood out as personalities, and we tried to be personality 24/7. I think there's this myth that you can have a great time, do anything you want until 10 a.m. Then at 10:01, you got to go real clean and just no. You can have character and personality throughout the day. The top 40 stations in the early 60s had that. The night guy
Oh yeah,
was crazy, and the afternoon guy was usually pretty out there. And the midday guy was a housewife's friend, and the morning guy just talked a lot and it was very warm and fuzzy. And but each
and
station
funny,
had
funny
personality.
wins,
Funny is very important, and most of them were
funny wins.
funny.
I remember with you mentioned it, and you sparked a memory for a question, and that was about personality. Personality. You're not the only one that always said we're blowing it by getting rid of personalities. During the 90s, CBS Radio came up with this brilliant format of Jack FM, which was basically the first classic hits format because they were playing top 40 as well as rock hits. And their whole push was we hate DJs. We don't want DJs. We're good without them. We don't need you. Don't bother sending us your air checks. That's the kind of crap they used to put on their radio format. And the whole thing, while they were talking about how they were being so original and so different, it was on every single one of their CBS stations all across the country doing the same stupid thing. So it was all the same. It was very contrived. And I remember at the time thinking, this is going to have an effect because there will be people who will start saying, yeah, I don't want to just shut up and play the music. Yeah, I don't want to have to listen to that. And really, truly, all it was, I think, was we're going to put the cheapest format we can on there and then try and convince you that you're going to like it because DJs are uncool. How much effect do you think that had?
Oh, I think it showed that jockless formats could work. And it worked in a lot of markets. And I think there are also some formats. We learned this at XN where DJs are a distraction. For example, we had a new age kind of format, very spacey, sort of spa music, and a DJ on that would have ruined the effect. So those were just music and production. Other formats, our 60s channel, for example, was echoing the vibe of top 40 in the middle 60s. So that was heavy personality. So I think different formats have different needs for personality, but I think generally most formats require it as a component in creating fans and not just users. That's another thing radio has lost. It's fan base. A lot of people use radio, but they're not fans of it. It's a utility. It's like the electric company.
And it's a personality who can build that fan base, as we used to call them P1 listeners, where
Absolutely.
they like you so much that they will stick with you. They'll show up at your remote broadcast. They'll support you. They'll listen when you're on because they like you. That's a personality thing, and then it transfers over to the radio. That's why the morning show was always so important for anyone. I'm not telling Lee something he doesn't know. The morning show was so important because if you started off your day and you drove to work and then at lunch you're driving around and that station's still on, you can keep them longer throughout the rest of the day. And it used to be all about time spent listening. Keep them listening 15 more minutes. That's why the morning show was so important. Is it now?
The morning show is still so important because so many people listen in the morning. And they tend to be in an environment where it's conducive to personality, such as the car. So I think it's still valid, absolutely.
Good to know. Lee Abrams, you're one of my heroes. I hope you know that. It's every time I've gotten to meet you in any way, you cannot be more gracious to this goofy top 40 DJ who just is in love with radio, and all I wanted to do was be on the air. And I never told anybody, but I would have done it for free.
Oh, I know. When I started radio, I did it for free.
Yeah, huh? And then the overnights. Yeah, I hated that. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, sir, for sharing your time with me on the show.
My pleasure. This was great. Thank you.
Hey, by the way, how do we get a hold of you? If we have any questions, or do you talked about a couple of projects going? Can I help you with those? Promote those?
Well, it's all on my website, which is leabrams.rocks, ROCKS. Very simple. LEABRAMS.rocks. And
there's a .rocks.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But if you click on the radio tab, there's must be 50 articles about radio, and you can click on news tab, learn about the news project, and etc. So I'd encourage
very cool. Well, keep fighting the good fight, my friend. Next time you come out to California, if you ever do, please let me know.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. Lunch is on me. Fanny Ann's, Old Sacramento.
Sounds good.
Love that place. All right, buddy. It is an honor to get to talk to Lee Abrams. You just, unless you're in the business, you don't know. It might not have been much to you, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about a business that you probably grew up with. It was more instrumental in your life than you ever thought it was. And then when you look back on it, yeah, that was pretty dang cool. It's one of the pioneers right there, at least with the rock radio format. You want to help this show? You can do it at venmo.com/DoNotTalk. Venmo.com/DoNotTalk. You can also help by supporting the advertisers that support this show, like Mike Lindell with My Pillow. My middle name, Lee. Hey, Lee Abrams. I'm Lee, too. I forgot to tell you that. Charles Lee. My middle name, Lee, can get you up to 75% off products made in the United States of America, which is vitally important to me. MyPillow.com/Lee. MyPillow.com/LEE. May God bless you and keep you. May God bless America, but most importantly, America bless God.